All right, good afternoon and welcome. The November 20th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is 12:11 Central Time. At this time, we need to call the roll. Board Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Chair Winton? Here. Trustee Trauber?
Here.
Trustee Towns?
Here.
Trustee Norfleet is not present, but we do have a quorum present.
Thank you, Secretary Brown. I don't have any opening remarks, but welcome everyone to this meeting. Welcome to faculty and staff. Welcome to all trustees that are in attendance. We can jump right in and I'll seek a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Chair Winton?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet? Sorry, he's not present. Trustee Towns?
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you, Secretary Brown. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our September 18th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the September 18th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting minutes.
Seconded.
All right, Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Chair Winton?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Trustee Towns?
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you, Secretary Brown. All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the bank reconciliation policy. The materials for this agenda item are included for your review in our board materials for the November 20th, 2025 meeting. Bradley White, Associate Vice President of Business and Finance, will provide information in connection with this agenda item.
Good afternoon. So before you have the proposed revised bank reconciliation policy. If you remember in September, we submitted it and had to go back for some revisions and rework. It is now completed and up for your review and approval. Also, at the last meeting, you asked for information on what other schools are doing. So I reached out to all the other LGIs. I did not hear back from TSU, but for the others, I won't say which school, but I'll just say there are 2 schools that have the preparer and 1 approver, and there are 3 schools, including us, who have 1 preparer and 2 approvers. The approvers go from the VP of Business Finance down to the assistant controller at the other school. So as high as the VP, as low as the assistant controller, excuse me, assistant controller are the final approvers. Any additional questions?
Trustee Smith-Knight.
Can I ask a question about the language right now? Oh, sorry, thank you. Can I ask a question about the way the current or the revised reconciliation policy is
Yes.
listed? So right now it's saying it's a 3-step approval process, but really it's a 2 approver process.
The preparer and the 2 approvers, yes.
Yeah, so we just need to change that from 3 to 2 approver. Does that make sense? Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? One question for you, Bradley. On this policy, because I know we've had issues with bank reconciliations, and I believe it was asked at the last meeting, did our internal auditor have an opportunity to review the policy and provide any feedback or opinion on it?
Yes.
And then does this policy I guess, are there any things in this policy that will assist or help us as we continue to try to stay on top and do the bank reconciliations? And just want to make sure before we approve anything that there's nothing that's missing that we should contemplate in the policy. I know people have to follow the policy, and it's, you know, you have a policy, you want people to follow it, but just want to make sure that we're covering all of our bases on the policy and that it's something that can be achieved, can be followed, and that we're not missing anything out of it, in your opinion.
Yes, it is something that can be achieved and followed, and there is nothing missing that should be in here.
All right, is there a motion to approve the bank? For Trustee Young Siegler.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. I didn't read in the policy where there was an alternative signer if one signer was not available. Is there any plan to address that?
Not written in the policy, but typically what happens if the person above whoever's supposed to approve whoever should approve of the policy or the reconciliation, that person above that person. So if the controller was not there or couldn't do it, then the VP would do it. If the director was not able to do it, then the controller would do it. So the person who should be approving his or her direct supervisor. No, and that is not specifically stated in the policy, you're right.
So that's the standard for the university, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, is there a motion to approve the policy? But I think we did at least have one correction from Trustee Smith-Knight on what to be included or a change to be made to the policy.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the policy based on the changes submitted by Trustee Knight. That is, that it is a two-step approval process after the initial review.
Second.
Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Yes, and I would note for the record that Trustee Norfleet has joined us via Zoom at this moment. Chair Winton,
Aye.
Trustee Trauber,
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet. Oh, I'm sorry, he is not joining us at this time. Trustee Towns,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Secretary Brown. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the fiscal year 2026 institutional revised budget. The materials for this agenda item are also included in the board materials for this meeting. Jim Grady from Alvarez and Marcel will provide the information in connection with this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Trauber, Chair Winton, Board of Trustees. Very good to see you again this afternoon. I'm privileged to be here again to talk about the fiscal year 26 revised budget. Before I jump in, just to level set, as a reminder, Tennessee institutions of higher education submit 3 budgets in a fiscal year. The first one is the proposed budget, which we prepared in May and you approved in June. That's to get the fiscal year started. There's a second budget that gets approved, and that's known as the October budget or the revised budget, and that allows an institution to update its budget once enrollment has come in and all the final dust and numbers have solidified with respect to enrollment largely. And then the third budget, which we did last spring, is called an estimated budget, and so that's basically just a forecast for the end of the fiscal year and where we think the university will end up. And so that's just, and today we're here seeking approval of that second budget, the October or the revised budget. And so with that, let's just jump into the budget. Slide here shows a comparison between the proposed budget that you approved in June. You'll recall, I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom line number there, the net operating surplus and deficit. You'll recall that that deficit for the proposed budget was about almost $39 million deficit. We right now are submitting a budget that has a net operating deficit of about 1.8 million. So that's about a $37 million improvement or pickup. There's really one large or a couple large items that's driving that, and I'm going to go back up into the revenue section, and you'll see in the total revenues line that there's a pickup of about $45 million. That's largely driven by the appropriation under the MOU, the $35 million that we received in July, in addition to better than estimated or better than proposed budget estimated, if you will, enrollment numbers that we've talked about in this forum before. And that added almost another $6 million. So those are largely the drivers on the revenue side. On the expense side, you'll see that it got worse by about $8.3 million. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides, but largely one of the big drivers on that was some changes in assumptions relative to personnel costs. So let's unpack some of those variances a little bit that we talked about. Let's first talk about revenue. And this is just a reconciliation of that $45 million deficit, the $45 million pickup rather that we picked up in revenues. You'll see at the very top, $35 million from the MOU that we received in July, the funding that we received in July. When we did the proposed budget back in June, at that point, we had not had a final agreement or a fully executed agreement with the state. And so at that point, it was still a bit contingent. We've now, since then, obviously signed that agreement and we actually received the funds. So it felt prudent that it was time to include that in this revised budget estimate. Tuition fees, almost $6 million of a pickup there. That's been revised for the better than projected enrollment numbers that we had when we were looking at this back in June. And as we talked about, we ended up a little bit higher than what we had forecasted from an fall enrollment standpoint. The next item is related to the grants IDC increase. We're increasing it about $1.5 million. We had, in previous estimates, previous estimates that we had put together. This number was a little bit higher, but upon further review and upon further discussions with Dr. Quick relative to what he's seen in the IDC world, we brought that down a little bit, but still are comfortable with increasing it by about $1.5 million. Our year-to-date numbers, when I look at that and we look at IDC, first of all, when we look at fiscal year 25, our IDC number came in well above budget by about $1 million to $1.5 million above budget. And as we look here we're about 4 months into the fiscal year already, and we're seeing our IDC receipts coming in a little bit higher than what we had forecasted, trending towards that $5 million number roughly in revenues. And then just a couple of some cats and dogs here relative to the homecoming revenue. We certainly just the great homecoming celebration here and the excitement and some of the actions that the administration took relative to promoters and the like, we saw a pickup of about $500,000 there than what we had budgeted. We had some parking revenues that we've talked about, and then finally a scholarship expense. So just unpack this a little bit. As part of the state appropriation allocation that the state receives from, or that TSU receives from the state, there's some monies annually that's set aside to provide scholarships for, I believe it's called a High Achievers Program. And what we had found is that those monies had not been used in prior years. And so what we're doing here, and it's purely just an accounting entry. The cash has already come in, it's gone out. This is more or less just a accounting entry where we're recognizing these scholarships into a scholarship expense and actually allocating those to students who qualify. Let's talk now about personnel expenses. And I'm going to start at the bottom here and then come back up to the top. So the total change in personnel expenses is about $6.1 million worse than what we thought it was going to be in June when we put together the proposed budget. The largest driver by far, almost $4 million of that change, relates to some of the salary and benefit increases for the vacant positions. You may recall, we went through an exercise of combing back the vacant positions when we did the budget process last June, and almost went to a zero-based position basis, if you will. Once we did that, and then we started to fill some of those vacancies in July and August, what we saw was some of the assumptions that were used that were based on old salary tables, if you will, for certain positions, had not been updated. And so what we were budgeting was largely an outdated compensation number. And so what we've done is, as we've brought people on board, we've had to adjust our budget to account for the fact that maybe the position, for example, was budgeted at $40,000, but the person is actually joining us at a $60,000 a year rate because that's what the market is, and that $40,000 had not been updated in some time. And so when we found that, wow, we have to like add in that differential, if you will, and that comes to about $4 million that we are adding to the salary and benefit increases for those positions that have been hired that were once vacant at the beginning of the year. And honestly, you may ask, why wasn't that caught? We honestly didn't even, I guess, had assumed that those tables were correct and that they were working together with the budget office. It wasn't until we actually saw people getting hired and started to see the increasing that we said, okay, we got to go back and adjust this. So that's the largest. It's about $4 million of the $6.1 million. I'm going to go back up to the top and just talk a little bit more about some of these other positions. We missed almost $800,000 in temporary faculty benefits. These are the one-year contract temporary faculty. We had thought mistakenly that temporary folks don't necessarily qualify for benefits, but when we went back and looked, it became aware that those folks do actually. They're one-year contracts. Even though they're considered temp, they are contracts and are entitled to benefits. The next one, recruiting strategic investments. We've made some investments into recruiting and marketing. Certainly enrollment is hugely key in the next several years. And so we are beefing up what we're doing within the enrollment and recruiting departments, adding about a $570,000 investment that is largely for, I think it's about 5 positions or 6 positions, a recruiting coordinator, and then there's all sorts of recruiting management type folks that go along with that. Internal audit positions, there's 2 internal audit positions that we're reopening to almost $300,000. We've increased police and security overtime to about $200,000. There was a Texas State grant that was canceled that left us on the hook for some accrued payouts for those employees. That's about another $160,000. There's a Levi Watkins program position that we had to put back into the budget to the tune of about $122,000. And then there's some employee assistance programs related primarily to tuition reimbursement and tuition benefits for employees that previously were covered under Title III that are no longer covered under Title III. So all in all, on the personnel side, that's kind of a reconciliation of the $6.1 million increase from the proposed budget to the revised budget. And I promise I'm almost done talking so you can ask your questions, but I want to go through one more time, the non-personnel expenses. That's about $2.2 million of an increase from the proposed budget to the revised budget. We certainly have talked about the TBR contract. That's a value of about $850,000. Again, we've made some investments in the recruiting. On the non-personnel side, these are largely related to Slate. We brought in a new CRM system. It's related to Slate, some fees around that. We've purchased some ACT lists to enable us to go out and market and target students that we had never done that in the past. And then there's just some supplies needed for some of the recruiting events that we want to hold on campus, and some increased travel as well as we increase that. The insurance premium addition, this was missed through the zero-based budgeting process. We had thought it was covered under our global insurance policy, or I don't want to say global, our master insurance policies that we have with the state. It turns out it's not, and that it's a separate policy within the athletics department. $200,000 related to the THEC contract. That's related to the financial aid assistance that THEC is providing the university. There's $100,000 related to some lobbying services. Bus insurance, again, we thought bus would be covered under the state. We actually had to go get a separate policy through the state. And that was about a $75,000 premium that we did not have budgeted before. And then finally, there's about $335,000 of just a hodgepodge of miscellaneous type of adjustments, related to some supplier contracts, related to some of the homecoming activities that we just didn't necessarily know or have budgeted at one point, and there's some third-party security services or fees in that. On the departmental side, I know in the physical therapy department, there were some increases that we needed to put in there to help meet some of their obligations. So it's just kind of a hodgepodge of miscellaneous small dollar type things totaling about $335,000. And that's it. Questions? That's a lot of information, a lot of numbers, and a lot of stories, so.
I just have one quick question, if it's okay. The one question that I had in terms of the additional expenses, do you think there's any other items? I feel like we keep going through the tranches, and
Yeah.
each time there's maybe 3 to 5 things that we find out that are missing for various dollar amounts. So do we feel like we've finally scraped through the system and feel good about the information that we have today? Or are you thinking you'll be coming back again like, oops, we found something else?
In terms of confidence in the system, yeah, I guess let me answer it this way. Let me just take if you allow me a little bit of latitude, maybe be helpful just to define for you kind of the process that we take when we look at this budget, right? When I think about this budget, because there's been some discussion about if we can't trust the financial systems around here, how do we really feel comfortable about it, right? And when I think about like the financial statements, this is not a financial statement. This is a budget. The financial statement would be certainly a data point that you'd want to look at. But when I look through, and if I go down through like tuition and fees, like, we can see students that are in classes. We can see those numbers. We know financial aid that's been applied. We know drawdowns that we've received for Pell and that sort of, and the like, right? So we feel pretty good about that. I don't necessarily need a financial statement to rely on that because I see it happening in the system. State appropriations, that's a pretty easy one, right? That's given by the government. We can tie back that to pretty quickly. The other E&G revenue, there's some athletic information in there. Athletic information. There's athletic budgets in there. There's homecoming pickups in there. There's the IDC that I talked about. And a lot of that, again, is looking at what we see coming in the door, right, from a cash perspective. So when I look at the revenue side, I feel pretty good about where that's at. On the expense side, that's one where, what we have done is we've sat with every department and every unit and the like last spring. And we went through their budgets, looking both at what they had actually spent their money on in past years, and almost met with every single one of them to get a buildup of like, look, this is what we need to accomplish what it is, our mission is within the state, and within Tennessee State University. And so a lot of that expense stuff is largely relying, number one, on that. Number two, we've gone back and looked at disbursements for, I think, 2 years. Like when you look at your checking account, like we've gone back and looked at TSU's checking account for 2 years, right? And we've maybe even longer than that, and tried to model out like exactly what expense goes where. So we've done a little bit of that diligence. And then there is, we can see like actual activity as it hits the books. Is it perfect? It's not, because sometimes it's not totally allocated properly, but we get a sense from an expense side where we're landing. And that's kind of what we saw some of these adjustments that we had to make now. So I sit here with this budget right now, and I personally think we're going to beat it. because I do know that within those personnel numbers are positions that won't ever be filled. There's usually about a 10% vacancy factor within the university, within its positions. This is budgeting as if it's all going to be, those positions are all filled July 1st. We're now October 1st, or no, sorry, November. Good Lord. We're in November. And it's Thanksgiving. Oh, we're almost Thanksgiving. And we can see those payroll expenses running behind where they would be. That's a really long-winded of answering your question, but I thought it was important because I want to at least give you some, I don't want to say, I'm not going to give you a ton of comfort, I guess, but I at least want to give you an understanding of the method to the madness and how we built that. And while it's not solely reliant on financial statements, it's almost as if someone was doing my own personal budget, right? Someone would sit with me, not necessarily look at my tax returns, let alone my tax returns may not even be correct, right? But it would be more of doing other diligence on other things. Bank statements, payroll stubs, rent agreements or mortgage agreements, what have you. Like that's the type of diligence that goes into it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Any other questions?
It ain't me.
Well, we're just looking at each other, Jim. I guess
Or you and I are like
maybe thinking about questions.
Are you asking me telepathically something? I'm not gonna
maybe you did just a great job, such a great job. No one has any questions in explaining everything. Trustee Towns.
Mr. Chair, if I might, Jim, just so that I am clear and I hear or see the number of $4 million, that additive expense is really related to vacant positions in which we had not considered current market in terms of salary.
That's right.
And not all of those positions are filled now, but we have made provisions for if they are filled, we would be at a market competitive salary. Is that correct?
I can't.
Or not market competitive, but at whatever the higher wage rate might be. That's what that adjustment is.
That's exactly right. That's that adjustment. Yes.
Thank you.
I think of it as that there's tiers, right? And at a certain level, right? This is common, I think, in public institutions, right? Like there's levels of employees, right? And those levels range from, $40,000 to $80,000. It can be a big range, right? And you get someone that gets hired at like 60,000 or 70,000 or 80,000. And that range, if you will, or that table just needs to be updated, right? Thank you.
So the
Trustee
amount of
Lacy.
money that's in the budget, where are we in that range? Are we minimum, median, or max?
So the $4 million is what we've already, it's what we know about. It's people that we've already hired and adjusted for that.
I guess my HR brain is kind of working. Is HR, and I guess President Tucker, are you all working with HR to make sure the salary tables are, adjusted across the entire organization?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, then I will entertain a motion to pass the revised budget.
So moved.
Seconded.
Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Chair Winton,
Approved.
Trustee Trauber,
Yes.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
And I believe we may have trustee Norfleet on the Zoom link. Trustee Norfleet, can you hear me?
Yes.
And do you vote in favor?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you, Secretary Brown. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the report on institutional advancement. The materials for this agenda item are also included in your board booklet. Ms. Eloise Alexis, Assistant Vice President of Institutional Advancement, will provide information in connection with this agenda item.
There we go. Yes, it should be on the. Very good. Thank you so much, colleague. I appreciate you. Well, I think it's good afternoon. That's right, good afternoon. When I stood before you in September, I was a few weeks into my new role as Vice President for Institutional Advancement, and I framed what I understood to be Institutional Advancement's assignment, and that was to lead the charge to create a culture of involvement and giving to TSU that is significant and sustainable. And so this report outlines the working plans that we've established toward just this charge, particularly over the course of my first 60 days. And if you'll recall, we identified 3 overarching priorities, and that was to build trust, inspire giving, and drive results. So we do know that trust is earned through relationships. And so I have had the opportunity to have introductory and in some cases more in-depth interactions with a number of university-connected boards. You see those listed here. I've had conversations with colleagues across our campuses. And engage with students at every opportunity. I'm fortunate that my main touchdown space is in the Student Center. And so I get a chance to just talk to students as I'm there. They come into the office. I get to witness their interactions. But institutional advancement also has the pleasure of being advisor to the Pre-Alumni Council. So it's this really engaged group of students that our Director of Alumni Relations advises. Several external outreaches have included formal gatherings of TSU corporate partners. I've had virtual and in-person meetings with foundations and community members and partners, often in the presence of our president or cabinet members or other colleagues, as well as our deans and faculty. And a number of the board members here have hosted my TSU colleagues and me at major civic and social events in the city. And it really gives us an opportunity to share the TSU story and to also experience best practice in the community around engagement and fundraising. So we appreciate that. And of course, around inspiring involvement and giving, we are building on this culture of sharing the facts with transparency and consistency that President Tucker has created. So we are hosting a number of alumni town hall meetings. We do those frequently and with a number of different entities and organizations. And of course, you may have heard the president talk about it. I think he says there were at least 21 events that he attended during homecoming. Well, the institutional advancement team and I attended probably that many, if not more as well, dividing and conquering between not only the events that we host, but also making sure that as our alumni and friends and others hosted activities throughout the weekend, we were present. There were alums who wanted to give, and there were presentations, so we had them everywhere from at the Royal Yard to even in our offices. We would meet people and engage them, and if they wanted to give and we wanted to capture those moments, we did that, both intentionally and strategically. And of course, on driving results, it was important for me to understand the existing fundraising infrastructure. And so meeting with the staff that was there and talking about functional roles and assessments. I've had some very strategic and in-depth conversations with the foundation staff and the board, our foundation board members. In fact, our chair and others were here just yesterday, meeting with the president, colleagues on the cabinet and others to talk about our collaborations. And through the SIG process, we have been assigned, there's a SIG consultant who is helping us work on our gift processing moment, as well as partnering with those within the SIG community and our foundation team to make sure that our scholarship process is looked at. We have onboarded a new director of fundraising, and I want to introduce her. She is here this morning. Cassandra Griggs is here. Cassandra is going to lead our fundraising efforts. She comes to us as a skillful eye for data and processes. And of course, she's a TSU alumna, returning home after having spent 25 years here prior. She served in various capacities in institutional advancement, but most notably, she was the Director of Alumni Affairs and Annual Giving, or Alumni Relations and Annual Giving. And from 2012 to 2020, she held that role. And as part of that, she organized the initial annual giving program at TSU. And during that period, took alumni giving from 3% to over 7%. And took from $500,000 in giving from alums to over 2.5 million. So we're pleased to have Cassandra rejoining us and bringing her institutional history and knowledge, but also the great work that she has done in fundraising outside of TSU with Lead and Meharry over the last few years as well. We have had the opportunity to rehire. There were some individuals who had some institutional knowledge that were no longer at the organization, and so we lost some critical functions as it related to that. So able to work with HR and utilize our temporary process to bring those individuals back in-house. We've been pursuing and responding to private grant opportunities and focused on two strategic initiatives that you'll hear more about as we continue. One is changing the alumni giving model, and the other is framing a comprehensive fundraising campaign. So if we've done this work, there are a number of considerations, and I wanted to pull out a few. Staff capacity. Simply, we have more to do than we have the human, technology, and training capacity to do with the current staff we have. And so we're assessing what is essential and focused on high impact and what that looks like. We had some broken processes. One example, again, when I spoke of the key staff members who were released with no succession plan for their vacated roles, it created gaps in several of our processes. Two of those were electronic funds transfer, where gifts, where donors had asked for gifts to come automatically, recurring gifts out of their accounts. Banking moments, those were disrupted, as well as our payroll deduction moment, where our faculty and staff are able to make gifts that come directly out of a payroll. And so we are working on those moments as well. We had a backlog in receiving of gifts. And so what we realized is that there were a number of gifts that come in through a number of platforms online. And at one point, there were up to 800 transactions that still needed to be input, again, caused by the leaving of staff that were assigned to that. I'm glad to report that we are up to date now, and those backlogs have all been addressed. And finally, donor fatigue is something we're hearing, just the sheer volume of events, membership dues, tickets. I know if you all were like me, I can look back now and see all the things I purchased just during the homecoming period. And so it causes not only fatigue, but confusion, right? Fatigue among our current donors and some confusion among those who haven't given. What do I give to? How does it count? Those kinds of things. Cassandra and I were at a local chapter meeting recently, and we witnessed probably about 5 asks, all of them TSU related, some that come directly back to the university and the foundation, and others that didn't. And one of our longtime donors who gives significantly pulled us aside and said, I'm overwhelmed by this. I hope you all are going to look at coordinating and consolidating. And so we know that this is something that we're going to need to do. To get into our actual giving during the period of July 1 to November.
Can I ask
Is
a
the
question, if you
Yes.
don't mind?
Absolutely.
Just in terms of the considerations, so as I'm looking through the list, and I know that you guys are working with SIG, so that's wonderful to try to enhance some of those things, but are you also doing succession planning? Are you also, so what's your timeline for trying to get some of these things addressed? Do you have, typically you do a whiteboard and you have, here's my honey-do list and here's my priorities. And so I was just wondering if if you have, it's not on the page, so I want to make sure that we're highlighting that you're doing those things so that we're not presenting like, here's all of our problems, but we didn't tell us that you're preparing for your solution. So if it's ahead, then
Absolutely.
go
No,
ahead.
no, no.
but-
Let me, I'm pausing. Were you going to say something, President Tucker? No. Okay, very good. So we are indeed. In fact, on yesterday, not only the work that we're doing internally in institutional advancement, Cassandra helping us lead that as we're looking at the data and the considerations, we're looking at our org chart internally. Currently, institutional advancement is a bit of a matrix reporting, and so some of the core functions are report to finance. And so my colleague in finance and I talk about those things. The others report to institutional advancement. So we're looking at those moments. We are creating new and drafting new org charts in which we'll look. And strategically and particularly, we had a conversation on yesterday with the foundation board as well and the president about by the time the next foundation board meeting comes on December 12th, we will be presenting a strategic structuring model in order to look at an MOU as to how we work together and what that looks like. So we will present that. Thank you for that question. Yes.
Can we go back one slide? I just want to ask, were we able to quantify how much we missed during that period, and how long was it that the EFTs and the payroll deductions were not operable?
Yes, in fact, as we go forward in the next slides, I'm going to tell you the data related to it, and then I'll talk a little bit about timeline as well as part of that. Okay, so let me, so between July 1, which is when our fiscal year begins, and November 7th, when we had to submit this report for the board, we had received and receipted $2.1 million. Just something, some significant things of note there is that we noted that scholarships, designating gifts to scholarships had risen, right? And so many either redirected their gifts or made their gifts to scholarships. And that's understood because they were hearing the purge message and other kinds of things. When we look at the comparison of this time last year, we were about $100,000 less. We had $100,000 left receipted. But we weren't surprised, again, initially. We were thinking, again, very public concerns, right? And so some people may have been withholding their dollars because it was $100,000 and also over 600 donors fewer than we had this time last year. But again, because of the very public concerns and some breakdowns in the processes and communication, you might expect that. But when we looked at the backlog was totaled over $136,000. We're still doing the numbers. We know it's over 800 transactions. And so we will have for you the data as how that's designated and based on the donor categories, et cetera. But what we know now is given that backlog, and once we've gotten it up, that we're really about $36,000 more this time last year than was received in that moment. Let me pause and see, does that help? We can get some more specific numbers for you as we're going through those. And we probably finished the backlog, Cassandra, let's see, probably about a week or two ago? About a week ago. And given there's a lot of volume for homecoming, even when I went to, the 800, gifts are still coming, right? And so that period probably took us then from the time we realized it, are we talking about 3 to 4 weeks, with getting temp staff on board and our SIG consultant helping us actually manually input things. It probably took us about 3 or 4 weeks to support that backlog, get that backlog up to date. We are up to date
And
currently.
is that still a manual process, or have we automated that now?
So we are automating that process now. We're doing our workflows. You're going to hear a little bit more. We're migrating now to a new system. We're going to leave Banner Advancement, which doesn't give you as many features as a Banner is a great system. The advancement system, there have been some evolutions in the advancement world, and so we're going to move to Blackballed Razor's Edge. It's going to allow us to automate a number of things, and we're able to do that actually because of a technology audit and process audit that the foundation board did back in 2022, and they are funding the first 2 years of the migration and the blackballed audit, blackballed migration for us. Okay. Okay, and so So as you can see, we're up about $36,000 once we got the backlog and all in. And during this period, we have also submitted new grants, private grant submissions that total about 1.4 million. The next slides are simply putting into life the things that I just spoke of. You'll just notice on these slides, and I won't spend a lot of time in them, the two areas, endowment scholarships, where we were up $270,000 or so, and immediate use scholarships as well, where we were up about $250,000. Again, these were the totals that were receipted as of that time frame. That's by donor category. The next is by donor category. Previously was by designation. And so you can see here, there are two that may draw your attention to. Under corporations and businesses, you will see where we were down over $600,000. There was one large $500,000 payment that came in during this period last year for a specific project. So we know what that difference is. And under other organizations, similar, there was contractual payment from an organization of over $300,000 last year that we didn't have this year. And so that is the difference.
May I ask, how does the $100,000 decrease on the previous slide, the one before this one, compare to the $36,000 increase on the other side? I'm just trying to keep up with the numbers. I was almost there. Where is this number realized in your?
So that number is realized from the backlog that we had. So this is a comparison of same time last year, right? But when we ran the report, we had not input the backlog data. And so when we input the backlog data, an additional $136,000 was input. And so that's that number I'm using.
So this slide is pre-backlog reconciliation.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
That is correct. Okay, and of course, this final slide by comparison simply gives you giving, and it's about transactions, right? So you see we were down about 272 alums. Once we do this number in the backlog, we will have aligned, or we should have more donors. So again, in our next reports, we will share that with you. And we're being very strategic as we do our calendar year in ask to include our friends. You see numbers down, et cetera, there. So we're doing strategic outreach to address responses and how we reach out to our constituents. So the two strategic initiatives that we're focused on as we talk about creating this culture of significant and sustainable giving. One is changing the alumni giving model. You may have heard the president talk about this, but in essence, we're wanting to transition from an alumni association that is a dues-based has a dues-based structure to simply where all alums are engaged and gifts are given to the foundation. And so these conversations have begun with our national leadership and our chapter presidents. This slide just again gives you a sense of some of the reasons, the framing and context that we're giving individuals, the facts, again, the multi-year deficit, the scholarship funding gap, the percentage of our funding that comes from the state, the fact that currently, right now, 3 or 4% of our alums are engaged when we think about this whole dues paying and or giving model. And we've got opportunities to collaborate to increase that. And then, of course, these conversations about funds that are being raised in the name of the university, but aren't always managed within the university. And we know that our current model is ineffective, and it's also transactional. It's not transformative. And we believe doing this work together, we can have transformative giving to Tennessee State University and the foundation. TSU is a member of CASE, the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. It's the advancement professional organization where our standards and our compliance matters, those come from. And so this is some of the data that we also share from these organizations. You can basically see that 93% of all organizations now no longer even offer benefits that are related to membership, right? They found it's not effective. 80% now have reporting that they don't have a dues paying model. A lot of alums are sharing that they have fatigue, as we spoke of earlier. And then now over half of the organizations are no longer even independent. They are now a part of the university or organizational structure. So the model that we are proposing, in essence, is there would be no dues, all contactable alumni, and we right now believe we have about 75,000 contactable alumni. We're looking at making sure that we're getting correct and updated information as we do the migration to our new database. That will help us. But we know all would be automatically recognized, and they would be engaged through charitable gifts to the foundation. They would be engaged through purchasing tickets and other activities that the university, right, offers, and then just being leadership volunteers for the university. Their structure would be university staffed and operated, and so we know as we talk about that org chart, we'll need to build in capacity to do that work along with volunteers across the country. And our chapters and organizations will focus on alumni engagement and giving and recruitment and mentoring. And the funding sources, again, talking with the foundation and others about these moments, but what are the ways that we would make sure that the chapters are able to do the work that they do on the front line? They are valuable assets to us in engaging alums, greeting our students when they come for, our Knoxville alums are gonna meet our students when they play at Tennessee, right? Those kinds of things. We want them to be able to do that work. And so how will we partner to make sure that work is funded as well? But at the end of the day, all assets come through the foundation. So we have, these conversations have begun, just a timeline of engagement and outreach. And you should know that there's a steering committee and a task force that has been assembled that will help us think through this model, right? We will do this work collaboratively. And then finally, of course, our comprehensive fundraising campaign. And so thinking about, you've heard the president talk about accelerating our capacity to address our deficits. And not only just deficits, but also accelerating our capacity to do the great work that our students and our faculty and others deserve for us to do. And so what that might look like, we were envisioning a $100 million campaign over 3 years. It's a big vision, right? And there's some preparation things that have to happen related to that. And so you've heard us talk about gift processing and acknowledgement. We've got to make sure that the basics work, right? So we will do that work, continue doing that work. We're doing this database migration that I talked about. It's going to allow not only automate a lot of our processes, but our donors will be able to see their giving themselves. They'll be able to look at their scholarships and see what the balances are. Those kinds of things that are currently time consuming or that we simply can't do for them. They'll be able to do with the migration to Blackballed Razor's Edge. We've got to develop a budget to do the work, right? As we say in fundraising, you got to put the money where the money is. And so we'll know that the ROI on that will be great. But also talk about staffing, as we talked about, and then do a fundraising SWOT analysis. Most campaigns have feasibility studies, right? And so we need to determine what our strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are out there as we go out and ask people to consider investing in TSU. Again, putting out a vision that perhaps by June, we'd be ready to talk publicly, while we're talking about it publicly now, but come out of a silent phase moment. And typically when you look at campaigns, campaigns are both an art and a science, right? And so the science of it says that when you launch, you've got about a third of it either in hand committed through some sort of outright gifts or through commitments. And so we're hoping together we're gonna do that work. And we're going to blow the minds of everybody who knows the art and science of campaign, and that by June we'll be able to say that people are on board with us in this significant accelerated campaign. The priorities that are emerging are into twofold: student experiences, so academic, leadership and career development, and of course scholarships and other ways that we support our students, emergency funds, et cetera. And then campus infrastructure, the things that you're hearing talking about. We have to make sure that our students have the spaces that matter for them, right, that they can do the work. The engineering building has been funded, but we do owe the match, and so how do we, the match would be part of this moment. A stadium of some sort is a conversation that's out there, so is that one of the moments that would be there? And then, of course, thinking about effective operations and other areas of opportunity. gonna go, I'm gonna keep going here. Got questions, stop me. So board is oh, yes.
Well, I'll ask a question just because I focus in on numbers and dates. So the second bullet is campaign prep, but the campaign launch started earlier this year. Where are we in the process?
So, campaigns are usually multi-year processes, as you know. They can be anywhere from 3 years to 5 to 7 years. I've been a part of a number of six-figure campaigns that have lasted those various periods. And so there's always a silent phase, right? And so we can technically, because the president and other leaders here began talking about these transformative moments for TSU in January, we will count back to January. And so we'll look at those numbers and data. We think again, I mean, the truth is it's probably about $2 to $3 million that will be accounted for in that moment. And so that's why, as you say, we would look back, because from the moment the vision is established, you can look back. Case and others say that you can do that. So we will do that work. It won't, again, give us a large trajectory, but it will give us momentum.
And you don't believe that there will be any material changes from the goal based on the SWOT analysis? Or do you believe? Maybe I
No,
should ask that
I
question.
think the vision has been set. And so we will, of course, the information will inform it, but we don't, at the moment, we think that is our foundational basis. We want to, in some shape, form, or fashion, look to do at least $100 million. So, of course, it will be informed by those moments that come in our capacity. Sometimes it's timeline, it's not numbers, right? And so there may be other ways in which, as we go through this process, the information tells us that we need to adjust. And we will, by all means, be transparent and do that work and share why.
And we'll all remember we have 75,000 contactable alumni, right?
That is the number that we're seeing right now. As we do the migration, some other things may come. I'm already hearing there's some duplicates in that number, right? So, yes, but that's what we believe, not to mention our friends and others in the community.
That was just my way of saying we can do this.
We can do this, can't we? We can do this together. A big vision, and we will do, but it's also going to take some significant sacrifice and some significant commitment, right? And so some tough conversations, like for some, changing the alumni giving model, right? And how we do things. And so I invite this board, you're already the model, right? And so I come before you with a call to action because we do this work together. While institutional advancement is accountable, our partners will lead this work with us. And so we invite you to hear more about the changing, why we need to change the alumni giving model, and we want to make sure you have the talking points and other things you need when people ask you about it, or to direct them to me or to Cassandra or to Debbie or to others. Right, so please do that. As people say things, we want to know what's out there. We want to know the pulse of the conversations. We want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we want you to help us in that moment. In our campaign planning phases, we want you to help inform our SWOT analysis, right? So share alumni stories, donor insights, and experiences. And many of them are going to be your own. I hope she doesn't mind. I'm looking at Dr. Young-Siegler, who just helped us uncover something in our system just within the last 24 hours. Call us with those things. We want to hear it, right? Send the alums to us, right? Feedback is a gift. So do that moment for us. And then we want you to reimagine your own personal philanthropic vision and share it with us, right? What does that look like? What is your passion? What are the ways that we can help you realize that, whether it's outright gifts, whether it's planned or legacy gifts? What does that look like? And as part of that, to help us begin developing our list of prospects, right? We've got our current donors. We'll need your help in engaging. Many of them will have to bring back into the fold, right? They've had some experiences that may not have been pleasant. They may not trust us in this moment with their resources, but we know TSU is the best investment And so help us begin to think about some potential donors, and then let's talk about it. Doesn't mean we go out and ask them today, but let's think about ways to inspire giving. What we have to be mindful of is, even though we hear about deficits and other things, this is not, we don't want to do house on fire fundraising. We know TSU deserves the investments. Our students deserve the investments. So we want inspired giving, and so we want your leadership in making sure that happens. Yes.
I have a twofold question that are completely unrelated. So the first question is, I think all of us get emails or phone calls of like, why are y'all not asking Oprah for money or Mackenzie Scott and all the other ones? And I think a lot of times when everybody sees those press releases and things like that, they don't read into the details
Yes.
about a lot of the requirements. And I guess that goes into my second question. In terms of those types of gifts, particularly I'm thinking about corporate giving, and when they ask, you know, well, how is your alumni giving? And they say, well, you're not supporting yourselves, so why should we support? So I guess I'm just trying to make sure that we have a better answer to some of those questions, because right now I feel inept to answer those in a way that makes sense. So if you can provide any light on either one of those, that would be great. Thank you.
We'll do that. Well, first of all, your question, I appreciate it so much. You can only imagine how many calls and texts we've gotten about the gifts, the transformational gifts that are happening. And I always remember what one of my fundraising mentors reminded me: Eloise, real money is attracted, not pursued. Real money is attracted, not pursued. And the Mackenzie Scott gifts are a great example of that. You do not reach out to them. They do not want you to reach out to them, but they have a very fair and complex way of looking at data. They have some of the best things. I've had the opportunity to either work inside of or consult with a number of the schools that have gotten gifts. And those gifts are attracted. There is no outreach. They're looking at things like graduation rates, retention rates, alumni giving, right? Stability among leadership, financial data, right? And so there's a website, Yield Giving, that tells you a lot of that. But anyway, so we are doing the work. I promise you, they are going to see TSU. Right, with this great moment and this great leadership we have in place, all of you, our president and others, and the work that we're going to do, our alums and others, changing our alumni giving model is going to be a part of that moment, right? And so you are absolutely right. So we will develop, Cassandra, the team and I are talking about our talking points, if you will, our FAQs and others, so that you'll be able to answer those questions. And we are receiving those calls as well. So feel free to send people our way also. But thank you for that. We'll do this work together and attract the gifts that we deserve.
Couple of thoughts. I don't think they're questions, but I'm noticing we're saying, of course, changing the alumni giving model, but what we're in essence saying is we're combining the separate alumni associations. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement to say, yes, that in order to, that we're coming together to efficiencies, right? So the programming, the work that we would do, the fundraising, all those things would come under one umbrella with support of the university leading that, and that all gifts would come into the foundation. So yes, there is a coming together of our model and structure in order to have efficiencies and increase giving.
I'm just gonna make it real plain, because you know my mama's sitting here watching saying, wait a minute, what about my Tuesday meeting that I go to once a month? And the other piece of that is, as we're going through this process, y'all are probably already doing this, but you know there has to be a needs assessment for the request of support that goes through those associations.
Absolutely.
And what does that look like? Because people are really gonna want to know, you know, what does that look like?
Absolutely.
And even for not just the needs of the school, but the needs of those members, if that makes sense at all.
Yes.
I mean, I know y'all are thinking about it, but those are the things that come to mind, and we're not using that language. but that's what they know, so.
And I appreciate that. Sometimes we talk institutional advancement talk, and so simply that's why we need to be partners in this work, right? To say, what happens to my Tuesday meeting? Well, that alumni engagement across the country is going to be critical. Our alums are a valuable asset, so those things will still happen, but those are the questions. Like you said, at the end of the day, people want to hear what's going to happen, how will it happen, and what does it look like? So we are working with the national. We will do an assessment of the chapters and what their activities are currently, how much they spend on things, right, that kind of thing, so that we can know how to structure this so that it continues that work with efficiencies. Yep. Yes.
The mic is a little far away from me. All right, thank you. I was just interested in hearing your report. Just knowing that I'm graduating, I'll soon to be an alumni. I was just interested. Have you just explored the option of maybe getting students right now where we are, especially those students that are transitioning to alumni status, learning how we can join an alumni association in our hometown, or just getting that back up, or making a small donation or anything like that?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. There is already, there's several, but there's one TSU student in particular who has already, is already working with us. He calls himself a positionless leader because he's not an elected leader, but he is very much engaged in the community, and he has already agreed to be a part of our think tank around shaping the campaign and what the student moment will look like and what students will be involved in that moment. Because it's going to be important that there be pre-alumni. You heard me mention the pre-alumni council that exists, that pre-alumni know and are part of this giving moment. Because if we can teach giving while you're here, then it becomes a habit. And so we don't have to do that work when you graduate. Those institutions that have been able to significantly change their alumni percentage rate do as much outreach to students so that you understand why giving back is important as we do alums. And I'd love to engage with you as part of that process as well.
Definitely, yes, ma'am. I have some ideas, and I'd love to work with you.
Beautiful. We'll look forward to that. Any other questions for me? I appreciate you
You
all.
want to talk a little bit about the affinity groups that are chartered by the National Alumni Association and those who are not, that simply also have a version of dues that they charge in terms of how we're going about those two separate groups?
Yeah, we're being very intentional. So the first conversations we had have been with the geographically chartered organizations, so the chapters, right, in the cities. We do know that there are affinity chapters, whether it's about fraternities or sororities, or whether it's about colleges, right, engineering, that exist as well, and they are under the umbrella of the National Alumni Association. So we're going to need to talk about, sometimes that looks different for them. They tend to do the parties at homecoming, where there's significant resources that are engaged. And so we know we're going to be mindful. It may be even a different assessment than what we do with the geographic chapters. And so what the president is mentioning is that we're being very intentional about that. And so we will gather, we've started with our geographic chapters, we'll pilot and do there, but then we are being very intentional and we'll gather information so that we make sure that our affinity chapters, who will have a lot at stake in this around engagement and dollars, that we do that work together with them as well. Okay, so we've got a lot ahead of us. Not easy work, but meaningful work, and will make a difference for our beloved Tennessee State. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there any other business for the Finance Committee? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Chair Winton?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Towns?
Yes.
Right. We are adjourned. We're going to take a 5-minute break before we start the next meeting. 10-minute break. Thank you. Yes, coming back at 1:30.
and welcome. The November 20th, 2025 Audit Committee meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is 1:32 p.m. At this time, we need to call the roll. Board Secretary Brown, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Trauber,
Here.
Trustee Smith-Knight,
Here.
Trustee Qualls.
Here.
I have a quorum present.
Thank you. I just want to welcome everybody to the Audit Committee meeting of the Board of Trustees. First on our agenda, we need to adopt the meeting agenda as contained in the materials for the November 20th board meeting. Is there a motion?
Move to adopt the agenda for this meeting.
A second.
It has been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, the question is on the motion to approve the agenda as contained in the board materials. I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed say no. Any abstentions? The motion is approved. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the September 18th Audit Committee meeting. Those meeting minutes were included for your review in the materials. Is there a motion for the Audit Committee to recommend to the full board the approval of the September 18th minutes?
I move to approve the September 8th Audit Committee meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly motioned and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes,
Yes.
Yes.
and those opposed say no. Any abstentions? This says Secretary call the roll, but we don't need to call the roll.
We don't need to. We can do a voice vote. And just for clarification, it's approval of the September 18th to 2025 Audit Committee minutes. That's all right.
Okay, I thought I did. Thank you so much. All right, so that motion is approved.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so then the next agenda item is the internal and external audit items. The materials for this agenda item are included for your review in the materials for the November 20th committee meeting. Dr. Renee Forbes Williams will provide information in connection with this agenda item. This is an informational discussion item, so no vote is required. Dr. Forbes Williams?
Good morning, good afternoon, I'm sorry. Report of internal and external audits. Overview details are provided in your November audit materials. 2023 Financial and Compliance Audit Report of Action. The Division of State Audit released a report on TSU 2023 Financial and Compliance Audit. The report outlined 15 audit findings. Management submitted their proposed corrective actions, and 6 months later, the Office of Internal Audit reviewed the actions taken. The objective of this review was to determine whether adequate correction actions had taken place to address the audit findings. Finding 1, management lacked appropriate oversight, allowing a breakdown of controls. Not corrected. Management continues to show inadequate controls, oversights, and knowledge in several critical areas of their accounting ledger and related systems. Furthermore, due to current staff shortages, there is a lack of proper internal controls. On a positive note, management has recently hired a controller that began November 10th and a CFO whom is scheduled to begin her role soon. Finding 2, management continues to disregard basic financial controls by not performing bank reconciliations timely. Not corrected. The reconciliations have not been prepared or reviewed according to schedule, and even the finalized versions contain discrepancies that require attention. Finding 3, management allowed controls to break down, resulting in errors in the financial statement. Not corrected. TSU has encountered difficulties in hiring employees with the requisite experience and skills necessary to ensure the accuracy of its financial statements. Finding 4, TSU management did not have adequate controls over ledgers, grants, and subledgers and did not perform their reconciliations. Not corrected. Management continues to highlight a staffing shortage. Finding 5, TSU did not appropriately charge fees for some courses and did not charge student fees in accordance with the approved rates. Internal audit was unable to verify this. Additional details are in your audit material. Finding 6, as noted in the prior audits, TSU did not adequately support or identify student withdrawal dates and types. Again, internal audit was not able to verify whether or not this was being done. Additional information is provided in your audit material. Finding 7, as noted in the prior 6 audits, TSU personnel did not perform adequate collection procedures for accounts receivable. This is partially corrected. TSU personnel has enhanced their accounts receivable collection procedure. During the fall term, TSU implemented its purge policy. Finding 8, which is a triple E audit, the TSU Foundation did not comply with audit allocation requirements or limits on the amount of a single investment manager can manage for each investment class as defined by its investments policy. Not corrected. There was no updated policy. They still have the December 2024 policy. No updates have been made. Finding 9, HERF funds. TSU continued not to follow federal guidelines for the higher education emergency relief funds. Not corrected. A policy of scholarship, grants, and emergency funds is still being drafted. Limited action has been taken regarding this finding. Finding 10. This is also single audit finding 2024-001. The Financial Aid Office did not adequately reconcile its direct loan records. Not corrected, however, improvements have been made. The Financial Aid Office revised its policies and procedures regarding the reconciliation process. However, monthly reconciliations for the 2024-25 academic year has not yet been completed. Also, a director of compliance has been hired. Finding 11. Also, single audit finding 2024-02. TSU did not have adequate procedures to ensure Title IV credits were refunded timely per federal guidelines. And this relates to the students. This is partially corrected. An interview with the interim vice president of business and finance revealed funds for students who did not receive financial aid adjustments or are current and was processed within the 14 days for the fall 25 term. Finding 12, single audit finding 2024-003. For the federal direct loans and Pell Grants, TSU did not report timely and accurate information regarding students' enrollment status. Not corrected. Efforts are currently underway to rectify the error report. However, the errors identified during this reporting process have not had corrective measures implemented within the expected time frame of 5 to 7 days. Finding 13, single audit finding 2024-004, TSU continued not to return Title IV funds in compliance with federal regulations. Not corrected. The Office of Financial Aid planned to conduct a comprehensive review of Title IV funds for the 2023-24 academic year. Finding 14, TSU Office of Financial Aid granted Title IV funds to ineligible students. Not corrected. Again, improvements made. A new Assistant Director of Compliance and Technical Support has been appointed. However, the Office of Internal Audit could not determine if Title IV funds were awarded solely to qualified students. Finding 15, reserved for executive session. Any questions?
I do have a question, more so about process. For the items that are not corrected as of this point, does the state give us another 30 days to address it? What's the next step?
No, no additional time is actually given. They come back and do another audit, with the next audit is scheduled to begin next month. And that would be audit for financial year 2025.
And so, to
We
clarify.
submit this report to the state.
This is for FY '23. You do your 6 months check-in to see if we've addressed it, and we have not.
Correct.
We just finished a '24 audit, which we'll talk about too. But the things that are not addressed as of today will show up in the '25 audit. Is that correct?
Correct. Any additional questions?
All right, I don't see any additional questions from any other trustee. So, thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item.
Next agenda item.
Oh, wait, gotta read my little script.
No, it's not the next agenda. Same
The next
agenda
item
item.
on the agenda is the internal and external quality assessments, the gap assessment
No,
results.
no, we're still in,
Isn't that it?
yeah, no, we're not moving
Oh,
on.
I apologize.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Next topic. Conflict of interest review report. According to policy number 107, all employees of TSU are expected to serve the interests of the state of Tennessee and its citizens. Employees must avoid any activities or situations that may either directly or indirectly place their personal interests above their professional obligation to the state and its citizens. The policy established standards of integrity and objectivity to guide the actions of all TSU employees. The Office of Internal Audit and the Risk and Financial Compliance Office collects conflict of interest forms from all employees annually. This year, the president had made the submission of the form for full-time employees a condition of employment, resulting in a 100% submission rate. So the first year on the screen, 2023, 2024, that included full and part-time. Also, of course, in 2024-25, the 1,417, that included full and part-time. We had a 64.9% rate in 2023-24, 24-25, 83%, and in 25-26, 100%, but it included all full-time employees. Okay. Any questions?
All right, if there are no other questions on this agenda item, then we will move to the next item on the agenda, the internal and external quality assessments, and the gap assessments results. So the materials for this agenda item are included for your review in the materials for the committee meeting. Dr. Forbes Williams will provide information in connection with this agenda item. This is for informational discussion only, so no vote is required.
The gap assessment summary. The gap assessment is our initial step towards meeting both internal and external assessment requirements. The M&R Group conducted this assessment to provide executive leadership, audit committee members, and the Office of Internal Audit with valuable insights into any existing gaps, improvement opportunities, and actions needed to ensure that internal audit complies with the Institute of Internal Audit global standards. Summary of action steps needed for executive leadership and the audit committee: evaluate TSU's ethics program and enhance to include other anonymous hotlines reporting. Coordinate efforts to update the TSU strategic plan, enhance the institution enterprise risk management program, update audit committee and internal audit charters, provide feedback to CAE on internal audit needs, ensure the CAE is notified to be able to coordinate assurance activities, review internal audit quality assurance improvement programs. Any questions for the executive leadership requirements or needs? well, my responsibilities. Action steps for the chief audit executive. We have completed a few of the steps. Oh, not all of those. That's an error. I'll say, the first two with check marks, we have completed that. Update audit committee charter and update internal audit service charter, that's completed. The strategic plan for internal audit is not completed. The update of audit department policies and procedure manual is completed. The education of the board audit committee executives and other key stakeholders on internal audit roles and responsibilities, that's not completed. Update attestation to include expected behavior and characteristics in accordance with global standards. Solicit feedback from the audit committee and board for enhancing internal audit reporting, that is not completed. And formalize the quality assurance improvement program, that also is not completed. The last two is not completed. The details of this report were shared with the audit committee and the president. The M&A group is available to share the assessment details with the board at the board's convenience.
No,
Any
I
questions?
don't have a question. I just have a comment for, I guess, the full board. We all had, I think, a very robust conversation with the M&A group. I don't think we were surprised by any of these. We know staffing has been a challenge for us, but also with the new governance in place, you know, it gives us an opportunity to get it right. So I am hopeful. I know it will take time, and I think it's going to take all of us. So it's not just an individual person responsible for this. So we've got some work to do. But thank you for your work. I know it was a lot, and there's still more to do. So I appreciate you. Questions, comments? Okay. Anything else on this item?
No.
Do have one question.
Sure.
In terms of the gap assessment, can you tell us the last time we've had an external gap assessment
Well,
completed?
the last external assessment, we didn't do a CAP assessment in the past, but the last external assessment was 2018.
Okay, so we are very far behind in terms of, and would you say by conducting that gap assessment that will help us to ensure that we can address a lot of those audit findings that we've seen from the state of Tennessee?
I hesitate to say that in terms of addressing the audit findings, but it definitely will help us in terms of our external assessment.
Okay, thank you.
But I also think it will help with culture and tone. So that will drive, I think, the results of the audits. This is Dimeta's perspective.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Are there other questions on the gap assessment? All right, if not, then we'll move forward to the next agenda item, which is the review of outstanding audit issues and audit plan status. The materials for this agenda item are included for your review in the materials for the committee meeting. Dr. Forbes Williams will provide information in connection with this agenda item. And again, this is an informational discussion item, so no vote is required.
A detailed picture is located in your audit materials, but we do have a summary here. NCAA Student Assistance Fund FY 2025, we've completed. The State Audit Single Audit FY 2024 follow-up is completed. The QAR internal is in process. That's what we just talked about with the gap assessments. And I would want to mention something about the gap assessment. It would actually help us find areas in terms of internal controls that would help us with our findings. The State Audit Financial Audit 2023 follow-up is completed. State Audit EEE Audit FY 2023 follow-up is completed. The President's Expense Report FY 2025 is required, however, it's not completed. The review of the management's risk assessment is required, however, not completed. In reference to the risk base, Accounts payable internal controls review is in process. Procurement internal controls review is also in process, and travel internal control review is also in process. Review of the conflict of interest forms, we have collected them, however, they have not been reviewed. That's kind of an update of what's going on at this point. Any questions?
No questions? Anything else on this agenda item?
No.
You've been very busy, and we appreciate all the work that you do. At this time, we're going to need to move for adjournment so we can discuss items that are confidential, deemed confidential under state law. Is there a motion to move the to adjourn the audit committee meeting so we can enter into executive session?
I move to adjourn the audit committee meeting so we can move into executive session.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, then those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Any abstentions? All right, so it's, the motion carries. So we will move at this time into executive session, and the only people remaining in the room will be the board, the president, internal audit, and our secretary.